In my family, there were always two versions of reality: the one that actually happened, and the one my parents told themselves. In their version, my brother Jake was brilliant, ambitious, destined for something big. In the real version, Jake was reckless, irresponsible, and very good at convincing people to give him second chances. But my parents never saw that, because Jake wasn't just their son, he was their favorite. Growing up with Jake felt like living in two completely different families. If Jake forgot his homework, my parents blamed the teacher. If I forgot mine, they said I wasn't trying hard enough. If Jake broke something, it was an accident. If I broke something, it became a lecture about responsibility. The rules were different. The expectations were different. And the punishments were very different. But the biggest difference wasn't discipline. It was belief. My parents believed Jake would become someone important. They believed I would simply take care of myself. Jake was charming. That was his greatest skill. He could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with 3 new friends and someone offering him an opportunity. Teachers liked him. Neighbors liked him. Even people he disappointed liked him. Because Jake always had an explanation, and my parents believed every single one. When Jake dropped out of college, my mother said he was too creative for school. When he lost his first job, my father said the company didn't appreciate his talent. When Jake borrowed money from relatives and never paid them back, my parents quietly paid the debt for him. Every time something went wrong, Jake received the same thing: another chance. Meanwhile, I became something else entirely: the responsible child, the reliable one, the one who didn't ask for help. Because asking for help never worked. If I needed money for textbooks, my parents told me to get a part-time job. If I needed help with rent, they said adulthood required sacrifice, and I accepted that. Because eventually, I realized something important. I wasn't competing with Jake. I was living in a system that was built for him. When I turned 22, I moved out. Not dramatically, not angrily, just quietly. I found a job in another city, rented a small apartment with thin walls and a terrible view, and started building a life that didn't depend on my parents' approval. Jake stayed home. Of course he did. My parents supported him financially. They paid for his car. They paid for his business ideas. They even paid his credit card bills more than once. And every time something went wrong, my mother said the same thing: Jake just needs support. When Jake turned 28, he came home with what he called the opportunity of a lifetime, a startup. Or at least, that's what he called it. He spoke confidently about technology, investors, and massive growth potential. My father was fascinated. For the first time in years, he looked proud. Jake explained that he just needed early funding, seed capital. My parents didn't hesitate. They gave him $200,000, their retirement savings. When I heard about the investment, I asked one simple question: did you verify the company? The room went quiet. My father frowned immediately. You always assume the worst about your brother. My mother added something that sounded painfully familiar. Why can't you just support him? Support. That word again. Jake received support. I received lectures. So I stopped arguing. 'Cause sometimes the hardest part about watching someone make a mistake is knowing they won't believe you until the damage is already done. For the next few months, Jake sent updates: emails about product development, photos from meetings, excited messages about potential investors. My parents were thrilled. They told everyone their son was building a technology company. Every family dinner turned into another story about Jake's success. Meanwhile, I watched the details carefully. Because something about the story felt wrong. The investors had no names. The meetings had no addresses. The timelines kept changing. And the more I listened, the less real the company sounded. One night, I decided to check something myself. Just curiosity, nothing dramatic. I opened my laptop and searched the company name. No business registration, no investors, no press releases, no employees, nothing. Just a simple website. And the more I looked at that website, the more something terrible started forming in my mind. Because the site looked like it had been built in a few hours, not months. And suddenly I realized something. The company didn't exist. I confronted Jake the next time I saw him. We were standing outside my parents' house. The sun was setting. The street was quiet. I showed him the research. No registration, I said. No investors. No employees. Jake stared at the screen for a moment. Then he laughed. Actually, laughed. "You always were the boring one," he said. My stomach tightened. What does that mean? Jake looked at me calmly. Then he said something that made the entire situation suddenly terrifying. "The company isn't the plan." "What is?" I asked. Jake smiled. "Leaving." At the time, I thought he was joking or exaggerating because the alternative was too extreme to believe. But 3 weeks later, my father called me in the middle of the night. His voice sounded different. Not angry, not confident, just afraid. "Jake is gone," he said. And that was only the beginning. My father never called in the middle of the night. Not when I was in college. Not when I moved to another city. Not even when my grandmother passed away. So when my phone lit up at 2:17 a.m., I knew something was wrong. I answered immediately. "Hello?" For a few seconds, my father didn't speak. When he finally did, his voice sounded strange, small. "Jake is gone." The words didn't make sense at first. "What do you mean gone?" Another pause. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "He took the money." By the time I arrived at my parents' house the next morning, everything felt different. The house looked the same driveway, same carefully maintained garden, same expensive front door. But the atmosphere inside was completely different. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table crying. My father stood near the window staring at his phone. Neither of them greeted me. My father finally turned. "He transferred everything," he said. "Everything?" He nodded slowly. "Savings, investment accounts, retirement funds." For the first time in my life, my father looked completely defeated. Jake hadn't left a note. He hadn't called. His phone was off. His apartment was empty. The only evidence he had ever been there was a few forgotten clothes and a broken coffee mug in the sink. My mother kept repeating the same sentence. "He wouldn't do this." But the bank records said otherwise. Transfer after transfer, wire after wire. Large amounts of money disappearing in the middle of the night. My father finally said something quietly. "You tried to warn us." The police were involved quickly, not because the money was technically stolen, but because the transfers looked suspicious. Several accounts, international destinations, digital wallets. It wasn't the behavior of someone starting a business. It was the behavior of someone disappearing. And the worst part? Jake had planned everything. 2 days into the investigation, a detective asked me to come to the station. I assumed they just wanted more information about Jake. Instead, the detective showed me something unexpected, a series of financial transfers. My name was attached to some of them. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "What is this?" I asked. The detective studied me carefully. Your brother created a secondary account using your information. My stomach dropped. Jake hadn't just stolen the money. He had tried to frame me. If the investigation went differently, I could have been blamed for helping him. As investigators dug deeper, the truth became clearer. Jake had been preparing for this for months. Fake business meetings, fake investors, fake financial projections. Everything was designed to keep my parents believing the company was real. Meanwhile, Jake quietly moved money into offshore accounts. And once he had enough, he disappeared. For the first time in my life, my parents couldn't defend him. They tried at first. He must have been manipulated. Someone probably convinced him. But the evidence told a different story. Jake planned everything. Every lie, every transfer, every step of his escape. The golden child they protected for decades had just destroyed their future. A week later, I visited my parents again. The house felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, empty, like something fundamental had been removed. My father looked older. My mother barely spoke. The television was on, but no one was watching it. Finally, my mother asked the question she had been avoiding. Why would he do this? I didn't answer immediately, because the truth was uncomfortable. Jake didn't suddenly become selfish. He had always been like this. The only difference now was that there were consequences. My father sat down slowly. I thought he just needed time, he said. I nodded. You always said that. He looked at me carefully. Did you know? No, I said honestly, but I suspected something was wrong. My father nodded slowly. Then he said something I had never heard in my entire life. You were right. That moment felt strange, not satisfying, not triumphant, just quiet. Because I had spent my entire childhood trying to explain something simple. Jake wasn't misunderstood. He was irresponsible. But no one wanted to believe that, until it was too late. 2 months later, the police finally located Jake. He wasn't hiding. In fact, he was living comfortably, in another country, spending the money, traveling, posting photos online under a different name. When investigators contacted him, he didn't panic. He simply said something that stunned everyone. I didn't steal anything. They gave it to me. Legally, he wasn't entirely wrong. My parents had transferred the money willingly because they trusted him, and Jake knew exactly how to use that trust. Months later, my father spoke to Jake on the phone. I wasn't there for the conversation, but my father told me afterward what Jake said. I just used the opportunities you gave me. That sentence stayed with me for a long time, because it revealed something deeper than betrayal. Jake didn't think he had done anything wrong. He believed he had simply taken what he deserved. My parents eventually had to sell the house, then the second car, then several investments they had hoped to keep forever. Life became smaller, quieter, but something else changed too. For the first time in my life, my parents stopped talking about Jake like he was special, and they started talking to me like I mattered. One evening, my mother said something quietly while we were sitting in the living room. We thought loving Jake meant protecting him. She paused. But maybe we were protecting him from consequences. I nodded slowly. That's exactly what happened. My parents spent years believing Jake was the future of the family, but in the end, the child they trusted the most was the one who destroyed everything.